Welcome to Wager Talk, everybody, for the weekend of February 17th and 18th. Scott Spreitzer here with Dave Cokin, Marco D'Angelo, Mark Seidel at the controls. Big show this week. Couple of top-shelf guests joining us. The Super Bowl of NASCAR goes Sunday. The Great American Race, also known as the 60th running of the Daytona 500, that kicks off the new season for NASCAR. And you can bet on it. You can make money on it. Lord knows I have over the years, and Lord knows Micah Roberts has cleaned up on it. Micah will break down the race for us from a Vegas perspective on tonight's show. But first, we welcome Ralph Michaels of Wager Talk to the show. And Ralph, boy, you've been cleaning up this season in college basketball, and congrats on the strong season thus far. Let's jump into the games right out of the blocks for Saturday. First game up, Villanova Xavier, big East battle. The Musketeers climbing to the top of the Big East. They were no match for Nova in the first meeting, but you had a healthy Eric Paschal. You had, more importantly, a healthy Phil Booth. Booth won't be around for this one, Ralph, but your thoughts on this contest?
You know, when you saw Trevon Blewett only shoot 4 of 14 for 11 points and Xavier have an 8 to 15 turnover deficit, I really like the home court here. You have two number one seeds from the early seed predictions, and this is one time when you're going to have a home court that I have rated as a 5-point difference with Xavier's home court. Get the Musketeers a win.
Dave, when I look at this matchup, I keep thinking, I don't know what's going to matter with Phil Booth when it gets to postseason if he's not able to be back and, be on this roster at 100%, because Villanova does need a little bit more work as far as their depth is concerned. Yeah. It's a short bench team. Doesn't mean they can't play 6 games in a relatively short time in March. But, again, I think Xavier's the class of the league as long as Phil Booth is sidelined.
I'm not going to read too much into Villanova's performance at Providence. I think that they did get caught in a look-ahead situation, thinking that this was a bigger game, being a national TV game against one of the other teams in the league that looks like a potential champion. My number on the game, now, with a healthy roster, I would make Villanova about a 3-point favorite. They don't have a healthy roster, obviously, and I think you have to knock them down a few points. And this is interesting because Phil Booth isn't worth 3 points on his own, but when you combine that with Paschal, who's dinged up, I don't know what his availability will be.
He's probably going to play, but he's been fighting concussion protocol.
He doesn't look right. Okay, I think he'll be on the court, but who knows how effective he'll be. And the fact that it's a revenge game for Xavier, I think this line comes in the pick'em range. And I would agree with what Ralph said. I don't know that I'll make it a play on my card because I don't like taking the worst of it on my power ratings, and I think it's still going to be somewhat the worst of it on my power ratings. But situationally, I think Xavier's the right side here.
I agree 100% with Xavier. Villanova, no question, looks like they got caught looking ahead. They had one of their worst performances of the year. Turnover-wise, it was a season high, 19 turnovers at Providence. They shot horrible from three-point range, just 3 of 20 in that game. In Villanova, they live and die with that outside shot. If they go into Xavier and they're not able to knock down the outside shots, they can get behind in a hurry, and Xavier can put pressure on you. Xavier, the final score of the game last night, not as indicative of that game. They had a 20-point lead at halftime, went total cruise control in the second half. They played no defense in the second half. The two teams combined for 122 points in that second half. I like Xavier here. I think they got a nice breather in the second half of that game, and this is one of the biggest games they've had in that arena in some time.
It was a free play for me on Xavier the other night, and I got a few tweets about we got it in there, but boy, it wasn't easy down the stretch. Got a little scary. ACC action on Saturday, big game as Duke travels to Clemson to take on the Tigers, and Marco, Duke crushed Va Tech last time out. The Hokies, though, in off that big close win over Virginia. Tough spot for them, but it was finally a situation where Duke put a team away. Even in the previous game against Georgia Tech, I had Duke in that one. They were up by 24 at one point of the second half, and then I got to sweat a 9-point spread in the closing minute of the game, but they got there. Duke at Clemson, I think Duke will be a couple bucket, at least my power ratings say they're a couple of buckets better than Clemson at Clemson in this particular matchup.
Yeah, we talked about this game on videos today, and there's some injuries to both sides. You got to watch the update on this one. But I was on Duke last night with you, Scott. It was a horrible spot for Virginia Tech. They were coming off their biggest play of the year. So I don't put too much into the Duke win because you can't possibly catch a team at a better time than to knock off, at the time they were number 2, but you knew they were going to be number 1 because Villanova had already lost earlier in the week when they upset their arch rival Virginia. And Duke, the game before that, they beat a Georgia Tech team that doesn't impress me. I'm just not sold on Duke this year. This is not vintage Duke. We know every year these teams, they have that quick turnover like Kentucky and the one and dones. So the team's going to progress as the season goes along. Mm-hmm. Well, this team just lost a couple games. To me, they're not progressing, and I like Clemson. Clemson's one of the better defensive teams in the ACC. They've held 15 of their last 19 opponents to 70 points or less, and I know 70 sounds like a lot, but when you look at some of the offenses in the ACC, now skip Virginia, but you look at the rest of the teams that like to go up and down the floor, that's a pretty good number. I like Clemson here on their home floor. They lost the game. I just hope they don't have a carryover effect from losing an 18-point lead last night at Florida State.
Well, they coasted a little bit, and Florida State came back on them, and that's the way it goes sometimes. The thing like Clemson is they're talked about as being an outstanding defensive team, and they are. But they're not slouches offensively either. This is a good offensive basketball team at Littlejohn. They're going to be really geared up for this game. I think Duke is going to be the favorite, probably in about the -3 range, I would say. And I have no problems with Duke's offense at all. It's not the first time that Duke's been an okay but not great team defensively. Duke will go as far as their offense carries them in the offseason, in the postseason. The one thing that I'll say here is the big kid Bagley. Want to know what his status is in this game because it is a difference maker for them on the road. They need him defensively in this game. If Bagley is good to go, I think you got a real battle on your hands, and I might lean at Clemson. If Bagley is not able to play, Clemson would have no excuses not to win this game.
Ralph, that's the biggest deal with Duke. As Dave said, the offense is fine, and this might be the most talented team in college basketball this season, but they just lose intensity at times on the defensive end of the floor.
Well, they're a young team, and they're only 4-4 straight up their last 8 games. Marvin Bagley has missed the last 2 games, and he did not practice. But the injury we need to talk about is Clemson Shelton Mitchell.
Sure.
The point guard who plays multiple minutes. He plays 85% of their point guard. He played 31 minutes in the last game against Florida State, got injured. He is questionable. Clemson cannot win without Shelton Mitchell. The one stat I look at, though, you look at Duke in conference play, they're shooting 49%. They're allowing 40.4%. Clemson's numbers do not equate what their record is. They're only shooting 43% in conference play. They're allowing 43% in conference play. I think you see Clemson having some pressure around them. This is a game that they're expected to win if they move to the next level. I think all of a sudden they start to feel that pressure on them, and Duke is the number 1 offensive rebounding team in the country as far as offensive rebounding percentages. Clemson number 237. I like Duke as long as both players play or both players are out with a star out for each team.
So most you'll lay. Let's say Bagley doesn't play. What's the most you'll lay with Duke in this game?
Well, if they're both playing or if they're both out, I have Duke -2.
Okay. Good stuff. Let's go on to Wichita State and Cincinnati, big double AC battle, and both teams are playing on Thursday night. Wichita State, they found out that the double AC isn't exactly the Mo Valley. You got to bring it every single game, and you're not going to coast to 20, 25-point wins against half the teams in your league. Interesting game, Dave. Thursday, Cincinnati was rocking Houston early, and then Houston made it a game. Wichita State was getting rocked early in their game against Temple, then came back and made that a close game. I'm not sure the Shockers can handle the defensive intensity that the Bearcats bring on a nightly basis.
Here's the problem for Wichita State. They never had to worry about athleticism in the Missouri Valley Conference. They were the most athletic team and the most talented team. They still have a ton of talent, but one thing they don't have is a lot of speed. And speed shows itself on defense in college basketball. You can have the slowest bunch of guys in the world, but if you run a good offense, you'll find a way to score baskets. But you can't defend unless you can move your feet. And what we saw in the first half of the Temple game, it was not the first time. It was the most dramatic we've seen all year because Temple couldn't miss from the outside. They shot 75% on threes in the first half. But what we saw was something that we've seen before in Wichita games this year in conference, which is they have a real difficult time catching up with athletic teams. They're winning games because Marshall coaches them extremely well, and they know what they're doing offensively. They're a really good quality team. But against athletic squads, they're going to have their problems. And Cincinnati is an athletic squad. This is going to be a very hostile atmosphere for Wichita State because it is a big-name team coming in. Cincinnati, we fired up for this basketball game. You're going to have to pay for it here. I mean, this isn't going to be one of those games where it's, like a -4 or something like that. This is going to be about a 9-point line. Wichita's going to be a big underdog in this game. So you can look at that and say, well, boy, that's a lot of points, and I'll take what you might perceive as value in Wichita State. I'm not sure it is. I don't think they match up well with Cincinnati, and I think there's a reason that line's going to be in the 9 range. I think I lean with the Bearcats here, although I doubt that it'll make my card.
Ralph, I was going to say real quickly about Cincinnati. We saw it again on Thursday night against Houston. Their shots can just fall awry. I mean, they sometimes have a rough time. That's their one weakness. I mean, sometimes they just can't hit the broadside of the barn. They had like 25 points before you knew it in the first half against Houston, and then the Cougars completely shut them down after that.
What you have to remember as well, Cincinnati loses a point or two with all of their home games this year at Northern Kentucky. They're renovating their arena, so they're not in their normal home. But, I look at Wichita. Wichita State was my number 1 team in my preseason guide, and the season has gone as I thought it would. They had the Missouri Valley Conference Player of the Year, Marquise McDuffie. He didn't start suiting up until late December, and he's only still playing 20 or 25 minutes a game. Wichita State, also remember, new in the AAC this year, so every team only had to prepare for Wichita State. While Wichita State went to all these new venues for the first time this season. So I think this actually helps them when it gets into March Madness to prepare for a better all-around team. I'm going to take Wichita State plus 7 or more in this game. I think the line will open up about 7. I'm a few points less than Dave. But in this situation, in a low-scoring game, they were home against Temple, Cincinnati off a very tough stretch, at SMU, and then having to travel back at Houston to come back before this game. I'm a Shockers fan.
And Ralph,
and I'll quickly mention I forgot that they're playing at Northern Kentucky, so I
said it
probably looks like a yeah.
That's what I was going to say. I'm real close to what Ralph's saying. I got him 6.5 points better on this particular court than Wichita because it's not the true home court. Your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I had it at 7-2, and I like Cincinnati in this game. I like Cincinnati in general. I think this team can make a deep, deep run in the tournament. I think they're a Final Four team, to be honest with you guys. They're the best defensive team in the country. They're holding teams to 36% shooting. And offensively, although they do have the periods where, as you said, Scott, they can go cold for a while, this is a team that on the season shooting 46%. I think they're a complete team. If they've got one Achilles heel and it's something against a team like Wichita that could be a problem, if you're laying 7 late, this team's not a great free throw shooting team. That's where it could come back to bite them somewhere down the line. But I like them Saturday against Wichita State. Wichita State learning that they're not the big kahuna anymore. They're in. This is Cincinnati's conference till Wichita is able to take it away from them.
Ralph, I tell you what, go ahead, Ralph. I'm sorry.
Marco, do we have a beer and a burger bet then?
Yes, we do, sir.
We're on.
I'm going to come. I'll tell you what, this much. I'll be the referee, which means do I get whoever buys me my burger gets a little bit of the officiating going on their side. But anyway, Ralph, I wanted to mention, it's really cool when you go through an entire college basketball season and your bankroll is seeing a 60% win percentage. And I had those 2 in a row going into this year, the last 2 seasons, and you're cleaning up. This particular college basketball season, hitting around 60, 61%. Incredible run. Congratulations, first of all, on the season thus far. What's going on this weekend for Ralph Michaels at WagerTalk.com?
It's just another weekend of college basketball. It's been great. Our Saturdays and weekends, for the last 7 weekends, we're at 71% for the last 7 weekends, both Saturday and Sunday. It's great to cash in the weekend and go in, and no huge plays on the horizon. But I'll tell you what, when you get quality plays and 61% for the season, I'm happy just to put out those plays each and every weekend at WagerTalk.com.
Absolutely. Good stuff, Ralph. We appreciate your time. Check him out, WagerTalk.com, each and every day. College basketball just kicking butt left and right. Ralph, thanks a lot. We'll talk to you again soon, my friend.
Thanks, guys.
It's Manic Monday, and that means every pick at WagerTalk.com is just $9. Get a play in any sport valued at up to $30 for just $9 each and every Monday at WagerTalk.com.
Welcome back to Wager Talk. We've got best bets still to come in just a bit from all three of us, Dave, Marco, and myself. Daytona 500. It's underway this Sunday. Of course, the NASCAR season begins. Speed Week has been exciting. Even more exciting is when you got a ticket on the race you happen to be watching. And boy, there's nobody better for the last 2 decades when it comes to NASCAR betting than Micah Roberts. Earlier on Thursday, Dave Cokin and I spoke with Micah Roberts about this week's Daytona 500 from a Vegas perspective. That was on the Las Vegas Sports Line, ESPN Las Vegas. And here it is, Micah with the goods on this week's Daytona 500. Listen, we're going to go to the phone line again. We got Micah Roberts, and Dave, we got the Daytona 500 happening this Sunday, and there's nobody better when it comes to NASCAR than Micah Roberts. You can give him a follow on Twitter at Micah Roberts 7. Micah, I tell you what, man, so many popular drivers have retired the last few years. Jeff Gordon, Carl Edwards, Dale Jr., all relatively young guys who called it quits, but if you're interested in making money, there are still opportunities. You proved that last year. You cashed 9 out of 10 playoff races last year from what I read. What's the biggest difference between handicapping NASCAR now as opposed to a decade ago?
Well, we can take the plate races and completely take them out of the equation for the rest of the 32 races on the year. These are completely different. The setups are different. The cars run different. And so what we've seen so far out of the clashes in the early practice is that everybody that's been good in plate races is still good. The last 3 years is still good for this weekend here. So you're going to start with Ford right out of the gate. Ford has won the last 3 races at Daytona, the last 2 clashes, including Keselowski last week, last 5 races at Talladega. So you've got a short field to choose from. You've got 3 drivers with Penske, with Keselowski, Joey Logano, and new teammate Ryan Blaney. Look out for him. Probably the best shot on the board as far as value-wise, 25-1. And then you also got Ricky Stenhouse Jr. from the Roush gang, and he's offered about 12 odds. And also last year, Kurt Busch. The first year, Stuart Haas switched from Chevy to Ford. They got the win right out of the gate. And Kurt Busch, the Las Vegas boy, I was at the South Point watching it. They got a big party going on there every Daytona 500 Sunday. It was amazing because the local boy won after 63 tries in plate races. It was pretty cool.
That's the thing is if people don't know about plate racing, restrictor plate racing, basically what it is there's a plate that goes kind of right in front of the carburetor there, and it doesn't allow you to go too fast. They're still going to be driving 195 down the stretch. I saw them hitting 200 last week in practice, Micah. When I was heavy into betting NASCAR, and you still are, and you're finding big-time success, and I was betting with guys like Sean Hess, Bobby Donahue. We'd bet at your joint when you were with Station Casinos. We'd always find a driver or two around 10-1. We'd find a couple around 20-1, and then usually one long shot, 30, 35-1. Do you employ the same formula now? And if so, where are you going to be investing some of your bankroll on Sunday, especially if you got us a big odds driver? I think you hit a 40-1 shot. Was it last year or the year before at Watkins Glen?
Yeah, Watkins, Denny Hamlin, the year he won the Daytona 500, 15-1, had him in the Clash at 12-1, had him in the 500 at 15-1. It was just an all-around good deal for him. It's one of those things like the regular tracks, the other 32 tracks outside the plate races, I recommend taking whatever your bankroll is, maybe 40% of your bankroll on odds to win, scattered around 3 or 4, maybe 5 drivers, and then play the matchups with the rest of them and use that edge, watch the practices, see what happens. But the practices don't mean anything here. In fact, the drivers, some of them, you're going to see they're not even going to practice. They're like, I'm good with my ride. The track's too volatile. There's no reason to mess up my car, so I'm going to sit it out. So if it's not important to the drivers, why should it be important to me as a bettor to play the matchups based on practices like we do for the other races?
Let me throw a couple of names at you, kind of in that mid-range and then a long shot. I'm going to throw first Ryan Blaney, who last I saw, and these odds could be changed a little bit, 25-1, and then Paul Menard at 50-1.
Yes. I love Blaney just because he comes over to Team Penske, so he's got a car almost identical. Now, he was with a subsidiary last year with the Wood Brothers, the number 21, that was using Penske equipment and had the Yates engine, and they were fat. They finished second in the Daytona 500. He has shown to do well in the draft, and now he's got a car and an engine and everything set perfectly to do just as well as Logano and Keselowski. Those guys are 8-1 and 10-1. This guy is 25-1, and he actually performed better than both of those guys in the Daytona 500 last year with the underfunded car.
Mike, that's the last NASCAR race for Danica Patrick. We're not putting her in the mix to win, but would she be a consideration in some matchups at the right price because it's her finale?
Well, all the cars are equal here, basically, and she's shown that Daytona's probably her best track, and she understands the draft. She's got a lot to go for and everything. But number one, she's not with the same team anymore. She drove that number 10 car that she was teammates with Kurt Busch on the same team and Kevin Harvick. She doesn't have that luxury here, so it may hurt her a bit. But I expect her to race fine. She gets caught up in the draft. We saw the same thing with Brendan Gaughan last year. Underfunded team, only going to race 4 plate races, and he went on to finish 11th and 7th in the 2 Daytona races last year for a team that only runs 4 races a year.
Tell us why we shouldn't be betting on one of the big names in the circuit, which is, of course, Martin Truex Jr., who's about 12-1.
Yeah, he hasn't been very good at all, and he almost won the Daytona 500 2 years ago with Hamlin. I think was 1/100th of a second behind Hamlin at the finish, a real super close finish. But he hasn't done well. That was his first top 5 at Daytona in his career, and that's 25 starts. That is a long history of showing in several different cars. He's got a car almost as good as Hamlin's the last couple of years, and it shows that just over the long haul, this just isn't his track, and you have to consider that despite him having a decent car. You have to consider that he just hasn't fared well here, and kind of leave him out of the mix.
Let me throw 2 names at you. One of them we've mentioned a few times in the show. I'm a fan of his. I think he's one of the best out there, is Denny Hamlin. And the other is a guy who I think could win the Cup this year, and that's Chase Elliott.
Yeah, Chase Elliott. Well, let's see Chase Elliott win a race first. We haven't seen that. He's got all the hype behind him, but the reality is in 2 years of Cup racing with a really good team, being Jimmy Johnson's teammate, and actually being, he's the next springboard to the next generation of NASCAR. Rick Hendrick needs Chase Elliott to be an elite driver, and you can't be that if you're not winning races. It's almost like with Dale Jr. the last few years. You got to win some races and be in contention there. So let's see him win some races first. That'll be nice. And what was the other one you said, Dave?
Denny Hamlin.
Oh, Denny Hamlin. Guy has 7 wins at Daytona Speed Weeks. He's one of the veterans now. It just seems like yesterday, 2006, when, he was a rookie. And, Dave, we're getting old, man. I mean, these years are just flying by.
You're getting old. Listen, I'm not actually not joking about it. I'm dead serious about it. I tweeted it yesterday, and I didn't make this up. Yesterday, I made my first purchase of 65-plus multivitamin. And the product was located right next to an exit sign.
Oh, boy.
Okay, I mean,
That's great.
So yeah, I know about getting old.
Denny Hamlin's one of your top plays, though, I'm guessing, though. I mean, I hate to have to get you back on track after that from Cokin. I mean, that's tough to follow.
Yeah.
But anyway, Denny Hamlin, to me, I think, even though he's 10-1, he's worth a few bucks. I know you're getting short odds there, but he's dominant.
He is. I like him to do well. He's got a lot of quality teammates out there to help him. And let's not, in the last couple laps, people aren't going to be – the teams are out the door. It's about who can take me to the front first. So the whole thing about, the Fords are better than the Toyotas collectively, which is true, but you want to be fast at the end, and you need something to happen fast, and you gotta make stuff happen. And everybody knows that Denny Hamlin has a fast car. He's the fastest outside of those 3 Penske Toyota or Fords I mentioned before with Keselowski, Logano, and Blaney. Hamlin is right there on equal par with them. So I just like his style. He's a conservative driver, but he's going to get out front early, stay out front, play the pit game, and he's going to run a strong race. I like him a lot. I think he can win.
One more question before we let you get away, and I don't know if you play futures as far as who's going to win the Cup, but who's 2 or 3 drivers that you think have a legitimate shot, and maybe folks might want to plunk their money down. It's a long season; it doesn't end until November, but again, there might be a couple of drivers that you actually are looking at.
Hamlin is one. You saw the change with the Toyota last year. The second third of the season, they were the best cars out there, and that includes Truex. But Kyle Busch and Hamlin and Truex, they were winning races. They were doing a great job out there. The other one is Blaney. I think Blaney's going to be equally as good on the 1.5-mile tracks. I think he'll be close to that, and he's been stellar everywhere. He won at Pocono last year for his first race in the Wood Brothers car, which was you guys know, it's like this this car never wins anywhere.
Sure.
And it comes out of the blue, winning at Pocono strong last year. So he's a guy I would look at as well as being a great shot to win the championship.
All right, Michael, I'm going to take a shot with 2 guys this weekend. Let me know if I'm making what you think is a smart move. I'm going to play win bets on Denny Hamlin and Ryan Blaney.
I love it.
Yeah, both of them. Yeah.
Love it.
What do you got on
Love
Blaney,
it.
by
Good.
the way? I think Blaney's about 20 to 1,
25
to 1? Yeah, from what I've
25,
seen.
yeah.
Yeah, they're in my top 5 this week, Micah, so hopefully we're not going to jinx you, buddy. I know you've been doing quite well.
No, let's do it. I mean, and it is volatile. So you throw it up, when you come in that, anybody can win this race. Danica Patrick can win this race at 100 to 1.
Yeah.
It's the cars are so equal that, yes, you're going to have stuff like that because there's 30 cars bunched up within a second of each other. And that's, anything can happen out there. So you have to take that in mind. It's not as concrete, like I said, like Vegas or Atlanta. The next couple of weeks, we'll see 1.5-mile tracks where the cream completely rises to the top.
I'll have both of those. My long shot will be Menard. Paul Menard will look to get him at 50 to 1. You can follow Micah Roberts at Micah Roberts7 on Twitter, at sportsline.com. Micah, we appreciate it. Great stuff as always, man.
All right. Thanks,
care,
guys.
Micah. When we come back, we will have our best bets. Marco, Dave, and I. Stick around. We are Wager Talk.
Every Tuesday, WagerTalk.com offers a best bet selection from its hottest handicapper. It's a great way to introduce yourself to WagerTalk.com with a big best bet winner for just $2 on $2 Tuesday.
Welcome back to Wager Talk Best Bet Time. We're going to start first with the man under the hat. You can follow him on Twitter at Dave Cokin, his work at WagerTalk.com. What you got for us today, Dave?
I'll go to this Wichita State Cincinnati game we talked about, and assuming the line's somewhere in the 7 neighborhood, I think Cincinnati's going to get him here. Wichita State off a great come-from-behind victory after a terrible first half against Temple, but it took a lot out of them, and listen, they just got exposed in that game for their lack of team speed on defense. I think Cincinnati can take advantage of that. Plus, the Bearcats are now coming back to their semi-home off a loss to Houston. Not the right time to be facing Cincinnati. I think the Bearcats win this game by doubles.
What you got going for us this weekend? I know you've been doing well, by the way. You've had a nice run in college basketball, especially the top plays.
Not exactly off to a great start on Thursday night because I played Wichita State in that game, and it was not a good play. They won the game by 7, but that was the largest margin they ever had, and it wasn't a good pick. And it was on the heels of a 5% winner the night before, so it was kind of a disappointing result. But for the most part, things have been going pretty well. I haven't the slightest idea what I'll have up right now because I got to wait for the numbers to come out. I got to wait for get my work done. I don't force plays, so I'm not going to tell you, I'm going to have 3 huge plays this week. I don't know. I might have no huge plays. I might have 5 huge plays. We'll wait and see what the numbers produce, but what you're going to get.
Specials going on is what I'm talking about, not who you got in the games.
No, I don't even know because I don't know what I'm going to be using.
No. Okay. I think there's a special going on right now, $139 for the rest.
I forgot.
For the rest of March. I don't want to know who you're betting on March 28th.
It's not for the rest of March.
I mean, the rest of February.
Yeah. Jeez, boy, oh boy. That's
You're not going to tell me who you got in the Sweet 16 yet?
No. No, we have a great February special. And it's it's right on the page. It's like $139 for the rest of the month.
Yeah, can't.
And that's going to take you right into the beginning of the conference tournament. So take advantage of that because it'll get you every play I've got up in Wager Talk, every single play.
And that's up for any of us right now, including Marco, including myself. You can follow Marco at Marco in Vegas. And what's your best bet for the show this week?
I'm going to go to the Big 12 on Saturday. You got West Virginia and Kansas, and this is a game where West Virginia lost the first meeting at home to Kansas. But if you go back, it was a bad scheduling spot for West Virginia. And I've talked about this many times on podcasts that you and I have done, Scott. I talked about it today on videos. West Virginia is one of those teams, and we talked about it in the Big Ten with like Penn State. Geographically, they're not made for that conference.
Sure.
So road games become a big issue normally for them. And when they played Kansas the first time, they were returning home where they played on the 13th at Texas Tech, and then 2 days later play back home against Kansas. A lot of travel for them. This time, they're going on the road, but they played back-to-back home games, did West Virginia, so they got some rest, and they haven't played since Monday. So now all they've had to do is focus all week on the preparation for this game, go to Kansas. Kansas is not the team that we've seen in the past. They've showed some weaknesses this year. They've lost some games. They've come back and won a few here in a row now, but I'm not sold on them. The West Virginia press, we know what we're going to get from them. Their offense has been inconsistent at times this year, but they have put together 3 of their last 4 games. They've scored in the 80s. I like that. I think that's a very good buy sign for West Virginia. I'm going to take them plus the points. I like taking revenging road dogs, and this is a spot where I think they can get it and at least take it to the wire. We should be getting, I think, somewhere between 4.5, 5 points is what this number should come out on Saturday. I'm going to take West Virginia. I think they are a very live dog.
Of course, follow Marco at Marco in Vegas. I'm at Scott Wins on Twitter, and I'm going to give you 2 drivers to jump in on with NASCAR this week. Micah got me all excited. Used to bet the heck out of NASCAR for about a 7 or 8 year period. Used to do quite well with Bobby Donahue, Sean Hess, and myself. And we used to have to beat up on Micah, which we didn't do often because Micah was behind the counter back in those days. But I'm going to give 2, a favorite kind of, and a 10-1 shot, and Denny Hamlin. Not going to repeat what Micah said earlier about Hamlin, but the bottom line is that there is probably not a better restrictor plate racer right now than Denny Hamlin, and as everybody knows, Daytona means restrictor plate racing. And I'm going to give a 50-1 shot on Paul Menard. And I'll tell you a little bit about Paul Menard. Last year in the 2 Daytona races, spring and in the summer, he finished 3rd and 5th in those 2 races. He was in a different ride in those 2 races. He's got a better car this time around. He's driving the number 21 Ford. And by the way, you want to be with Ford for the most part if you're looking to bet Daytona, whether it be in matchups or in the race itself. So Paul Menard at 50-1, Denny Hamlin at 10-1. I think we'll cash with one of those 2 drivers. And either way, those kind of odds are going to make a decent amount of money by the end of the race if one of those 2 does cash. Good stuff. We've all got great specials going on this weekend at WagerTalk.com. Thank you to Ralph Michaels, who joined us for college basketball, for Micah Roberts, who joined us when it came to Daytona 500. Can't wait to jump into that. For Marco, for Dave, I'm Scott. Put him in the win column. We'll talk to you next week.
And I bid you good night, good night, good night. I'll catch you on the flip side.